Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. We're here at the Catholic University of America in sunny Washington, D.C. at the 2016 Young Americans for Liberty National Convention. In the second half of our show, we'll be speaking with WWE wrestling champ Glenn Kane Jacobs, here to address the YAL students about his professional and political journey. Up first, I have the pleasure of introducing the new executive director of the Young Americans for Liberty, Cliff Maloney. Cliff, welcome to the show.
Bill, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Cliff, this is such a fascinating organization and such a lively young bunch of kids. I've had the pleasure of working with you on the road and getting to know some of the chapters over the last couple of years. But I thought it'd be best to start with a little history. You just picked up the baton from the founding executive director, Jeff Frazee, who traces his roots back to the Ron Paul campaign. We heard Ron speak last night. He's got as much fire in the belly as he ever had. You were a volunteer for him back in 2012. Take us back to the origins of your organization.
Absolutely. So 2007, Ron Paul, this very old man from Texas, announces he's going to run for president of the United States. To the surprise of many individuals, he picks up all this traction with young people. And so Jeff Frazee, back then, was starting to put together what he called Students for Ron Paul. And so these were the youth organizations on college campuses that were coming through to spread this message from Ron Paul's campaign. And what happened was the campaign ended, and like I said, Ron did better than anybody ever expected for this old man, this congressman from Texas.
If I can interrupt, what is it about old men on campus? Because Bernie Sanders had the same phenomenon this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, ideology is something that people get excited about. You know, when they hear somebody that's true and principled, it's easy for somebody to get attracted to that.
It lights them up.
Yeah. So back in 2007, Ron Paul runs, and when he's done, Jeff Frazee says we've got little less than 100 of these chapters across the nation for Students for Ron Paul. And he says, what are we going to do with these? So he sits down and, with the help of Dr. Paul, gets some seed money and starts what we now call Young Americans for Liberty. And so that started with about 100 chapters back in 2009. Mm-hmm. And 8 years later, we're in a great spot.
How many chapters do you have now?
We've got 750 as of last week.
Wow.
So 750 college campuses throughout the U.S., promoting liberty, bringing activism and ideas straight to the students, and really just trying to get people engaged.
So you started out as a volunteer for Ron Paul. You got involved with YAL, or Young Americans for Liberty, and then Rand Paul came along.
So back in 2011, I interned for Dr. Paul on the Hill in his congressional office. He was running for president at the time, and then during that next school year, I met a gentleman named Ed King, who used to serve as the second-in-command here at YAL, and he was running Youth for Ron Paul in 2012. Mm-hmm. And so what they did there is, once again, build up a lot of support. Now, obviously, YAL, as a nonprofit organization, is separate from any specific candidate. Right. But what happened was a lot of the support, once again, the 2012 race, Ron really connected with more people, but he brought that same message, right? Consistency, which made it even more of a powerful message because he wasn't, pandering to audiences.
He's been saying the same thing since I started listening back in the
60
80s.
years.
I don't think he's changed a bit.
His first recorded speech. So in 2012 he ran, and a lot of that energy, once again, from the young people, afterwards, they came back to Young Americans for Liberty, or those that we found during the campaign, were introduced to Young Americans for Liberty. And so from there in 2012, a lot of people within the organization, not officially associated with it, but a lot of the membership was excited about Rand Paul. So 2016 comes around, and Rand runs, and I was blessed to get the opportunity to serve as his youth director. And we started 507 Students for Rand chapters.
Okay, separate from YAL.
Correct, right. 100% separate.
Yeah.
And with that, a lot of people dive into, what went wrong with Rand? Rand said it best himself, right? He got trumped, right? Everybody in the room.
So did the whole country.
Yeah, everybody in the room, there wasn't too much air left in the room, as they say. Yeah. But what we were able to do, and something I'll credit Senator Paul with, is we were able to once again get people excited with that message, right? The message of liberty on the college campuses. Sadly, millennials are not voting at the rate we'd like them to.
Well, be careful what you wish for, because until I started hanging out with you people, I thought most college kids were socialists.
That's the beautiful thing about what we do on campus. I mean, we're able to identify people who, when we present the whole case, right, if we put everything out there and we talk about capitalism and we talk about the ideas that, I hate to say, maybe aren't so sexy typically on a college campus, right?
Monetary policy of the Federal Reserve.
Correct. And when we present that whole thing, we find that students, the vast majority of them, they don't want the government taking 30% of what they're making. They don't want, to know that these banks are getting bailed out and their parents are losing their houses, right? So, I mean, a lot of it's not the simplest things. That's why what we do, what we call campus activism. And so we take these big ideas or these complex ideas, we break it down to the simplest form, right? Let's talk about free speech.
They used to have that on campus, right?
Correct. Too many safe spaces these days. So, the past spring, we did something called the Fight for Free Speech campaign. So Yale launched this as a nationwide effort to really reform unconstitutional speech codes. So a lot of people don't know that these campuses, they have these speech codes that are absolutely horrible. And they go directly against the First Amendment. And
on the state universities, private universities can make any codes they want, right? So you got to have some nuance in there.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm talking about is when we look at these public universities, I mean, they are public universities,
they're supported
right?
by taxpayers.
And you go to these campuses, and some of them have our favorite speech code defined is they have what they call a free speech zone. Now, the irony in a free speech zone...
Here's a box inside which you can have freedom.
It's hilarious.
Do the kids get that irony? Or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's just getting the student leaders to know that they're empowered enough and that we have enough resources to go against the administration and to stand up for the constitutional rights. One of the things I said yesterday is I encourage everybody, we talked about this campaign, right, as we go forward, and we train our student leaders on how to successfully propose reform. Okay, let's identify the code. Let's figure out why it's unconstitutional. We've got organizations like FIRE and and Alliance Defending Freedom. These groups, they have lawyers. And so when we present this to the students and we say...
A plague of lawyers upon you, yeah.
Because these universities, I mean, they've got, money and lawyers and establishment.
But they don't like controversy either. So that's one key.
Exactly. And so we present that to the students and say, hey, look, and now that we've got success stories, right? We've got Nicole Sanders, a student of ours at Blinn College, completely destroyed the administration, took them to court. I mean, she was allocated like $100,000 in damages. And now all the students, I mean, not that we're not going after the money.
Yeah, you're not ambulance chasers. I got that.
Right. But what we're looking for is to say to students, look, this isn't out of the realm of possibility. You have a First Amendment constitutional right. And so back to the idea that we take these complex ideas and we break it down. And so we do something as simple as we'll have 300 of our chapters do this project where we'll send them a huge beach ball, right? And they'll inflate the beach ball, and they'll have Sharpies, and they'll roll it around campus, and they'll say, hey, exercise your right to free speech, right? Come over and write
whatever you want on the
ball.
ball.
And you'll have cops shutting them down.
No.
And it just makes for...
No, you're making that up.
I am not making that up.
Riding on a beach ball?
I will point you to some cases of ours, Bill. But yeah, what they do is they legitimately will come, right? Or we'll build a wall. I got to watch what I say. But we'll build a free speech wall, like a little platform, and we'll have people exercise the right to free speech. And, they will legitimately try to shut these people down.
This is campus police?
Campus police or campus security, whatever they have, because they're not in the free speech zone.
Oh, okay.
On these campuses. So it just goes to show, and it ties back into even the big government aspect, that there's so many rules, and everybody, the cops, it's this tense situation where they have to enforce it. And you have, a 19-year-old female who's just trying to get her fellow students to exercise their right to vote.
These stories are fascinating, but you don't read about them in the media. All we hear about is Black Lives Matter storming the president's office, making demands. They seem to be getting all the press. What's going on there?
So I think that the war on drugs is somewhere that a lot of our student leaders and even just millennials today, there are tons of issues there.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not saying that, we need to make demands and that asking for more from the government's never going to provide a solution here. And I think that our student leaders are leading the fight. We did an event called Incarceration Nation in the spring of 2015. And what it was a way to talk about outdated mandatory minimums, right? Nonviolent drug offenders. And the thing is, it's very easy to have two sides where it's like you're either pro-police
it's hard to
and
do nuance.
Anti-drug, right? Or, you're pro-drug and, getting high every night of the week and you're anti-cops. And it's just not the case. There's a third ground, which is you can believe in responsible policing and believe in that if people want to make decisions with their own lives, they should have the freedom to do so as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else.
Well, this speaks to the common cause that's cropping up between left and right on criminal justice reform, and there's many topics like that.
Sure. And I think the mandatory minimum issue is a great place to start. I mean, how can you have a law that says there is a mandatory... I mean, that's the whole point of the justice system. Let the judges and the juries decide. And we have a gentleman speaking today, actually, Weldon Angelos, who was sentenced to 55 years in prison for a nonviolent drug offense. Fortunately, by the grace of God, after 12 years, enough awareness was brought to his case that they said, let's look at this realistically. This guy's done 12 years.
So, Cliff, the Young Americans for Liberty is a nonpartisan organization. Where do you fit with the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Libertarians?
We like to say that we take the best from both worlds. So we agree with the right when it comes to the idea that, you should be able to defend yourself. The idea that we should have lower taxes, keep the money you earn. The idea that even just regulations in general, we want to get the government out of as much as possible and let individuals do it. But we also agree with the left on civil liberty issues, right? The government shouldn't be in your bedroom. The government shouldn't tell you every little thing that you can eat. Right, with the FDA and just all of these government entities coming in. And we also agree that we should be sober when it comes to foreign policy, right, and not police the world. So I think that Young Americans for Liberty, although we're nonpartisan, we take the best from both worlds and we always err on the side of freedom. And I think when you look at it from those terms, that's a simple way to classify the organization.
So most college faculties have become notoriously progressive. How have they reacted to YAL?
It is almost hilarious because right now there is no anti-war left, right?
Yeah, that's pretty strange. I mean, I grew up in the Vietnam War era. I was a McGovern campaign worker. I'm totally shocked that the left has gone to war the way it has, particularly behind Hillary.
Right, and so Hillary is a funny point. I have college professors who I know that are staunch progressives, right, taking classes on world politics and U.S. military. And to see them, even through social media, just to see them endorsing Hillary, I mean, she's the biggest war hawk we've seen out of both parties in, 40 years?
Does this explain sort of the lack of enthusiasm amongst young people and millennials for her campaign and why they went to Bernie?
Sure. I mean, I think that this election is a blessing in disguise for groups like ours because we are finding that so many people are disenfranchised with the right, with the left. They're in denial, the parties. They have no clue how to attract any type of new people. I mean, I feel like both the parties are dying, and what's happening is we're seeing students interested because you have the likes of Trump and Hillary, and it's a media frenzy. And so people are engaged, but they're turned off by it. And that's an opening for us, and we've really tried to dive into that. I mean, we've seen, even in the past couple months, like 50 to 60 new chapters started because people are so, how do I fix this?
They have nowhere else to go. And
they're homeless. Politically homeless is what we like to call them.
So one of the stereotypes we baby boomers like to saddle millennials with, and particularly college kids, is that they're so apathetic, self-absorbed, taking their selfies all day long. They don't even have time to think about the world or get engaged in issues like this. Are you finding that on campus?
Look, what we say is that people have lives to live, right? People are busy, and we get that. But what we do find is the leaders that we're able to identify and get them educated and recruit them to our organization, those are the individuals that we're looking to build as the next leaders, right? They're going to be the movers and shakers. And I think every generation is going to have, individuals who are apathetic to the political process or even just apathetic to, the philosophies we're talking about. But the people that we bring in, our goal is to make them really become the movers and shakers of the public policy arena.
Be the next. Isn't that the theme of this conference?
Exactly. So that's the entire call to action here is we are saying to students, look, if you're tired of what you're getting, if you're tired of what you're seeing, this over-expanding government, we're at war everywhere, we're policing the world, you're getting taxed 30% of your paycheck, if you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah, don't get me started.
So our call to action is, look, if we really want to do something about it, we've got 400 of our top leaders here. Step up. Figure out a way that you can impact the process. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the next Ron Paul, but it could mean, even starting some sort of nonprofit or just working to advance the issues. Maybe petitioning for something in your area. Maybe standing up to the local school board who's trying to raise your property taxes.
It's funny. I've had some interesting hallway conversations here, and I'm really surprised how well read these kids are. They can't be getting that in class.
Right, and that's the education part. So we do our state conventions to bring speakers like Bill Frezza out and talk to our students about the philosophy, but we try to get them to not just pique their interest, but to dive deeper. Right, so when we find students, I like to call it level 1 through 5, right? We try to identify people who are level 1, meaning they're interested. Yeah. They know something's wrong, right? We've been at war my entire life, Bill. Yeah. 25 years, we've had people somewhere doing something.
Shooting somebody.
Yeah, it's horrible. People are dying. And so I think that the more that we talk to students and the more that we figure out, what engages them, I think we can really make some progress.
YAL has been at this for 8 years now. You got alumni out there. What are they doing with their lives?
I think that is the funnest part of my job, or the most rewarding part, is to start to see individuals who, they came to us just interested in the issues, right? Mm-hmm. And we were able to really engage them and show them how to make an impact and really train them on what makes a difference, what really causes change. And so we look and we find, we've got individuals, we've got an old state chair from Florida who's running for Congress right now in Florida's 1st District, Rebecca Bidlack. I'm excited about the potential to start to see this more and more often. I know we've had at least 5 to 10 students who have served in very high-level staff positions for presidential campaigns. Mm-hmm. I know we have different student leaders who are now chief of staff on the Hill. And, this is all about ways to engage them, but we've also got student leaders who started businesses.
Yeah, I was going to say, do they all end up in policy roles, or are they out there actually doing capitalism instead of just defending it?
Exactly, and that is one of the major things that we try to make clear is you can make a huge impact from the private sector, right? We're always going to need donors for Liberty candidates, right? We're always going to need donors to cover our educational resources.
It's not just that, it's also setting a good example. We had John Mackey on a couple of weeks ago from Whole Foods talking about conscious capitalism. He's doing an amazing job spreading the word.
Yeah. And that's exactly the thing we're trying to say when we say be the next, is figure out ways to really show the free market's working, to show that we can do certain things through these principles that we talk about.
How are you going to recapture the disgruntled Bernie students?
We've done a pretty good job at that already, because a lot of them are seeing, even just this past week, that what was it all for?
The system really is rigged.
Yeah,
That's what they found out this week.
I mean, come on. Principle and standing up for something and not giving into the political class meant a lot to tons of these people.
Yeah.
And so I think that on the civil liberties and on the war issues and the ideas of being a sane individual, we're with them. And we're there. And they're connecting. They understand. They don't want the government involved in their social lives. And we need to make that transition to say, look, they also don't need the government in your pocketbook. It's not an easy task, but it's something that we're attempting to do.
How do you get them off of the equality binge that they're on, understanding that in a free market, in a competitive environment, outcomes are not all the same?
Right. I think that the Bernie individuals are actually going through, and this might sound crazy, the same thing that a lot of the Trump individuals are going through. They're angry. They're angry at something, right? Yeah. But everything this cycle, sadly, is driven by emotion. Everybody's mad or frustrated. Somebody is getting over on them.
But that's by design, I think.
Amen. Amen. And, people say you got to be emotional. That's how you connect. I agree. But at a certain point, I'd love to see, and we're working on this, making things much more about policy, right? And figuring out, how do you take these ideas, or let's say they're not even liberty ideas. How do you just have any policy? You want to talk foreign policy, domestic policy, monetary policy.
And actually talk about policy.
Holy
and not
cow.
Personalities.
I mean, look at the RNC, look at the DNC. Who did you hear talk about policy?
Yeah.
Nobody. There were no solutions mentioned. It's all celebrity and personality. And so what we're trying to do is recreate the narrative. We're trying to create a new narrative where we dive into issues, we get people excited, but we also tie them into emotion in a way that makes sense, like you said, because it's by design, to connect.
How do you avoid the wonkiness of getting up and trying to talk monetary policy or deficit reduction or quoting Bastiat at people? I mean, how does that go over on campus?
What we try to do is we try to reach people where they're at, right? If you're running up to somebody and you said, have you read Murray Rothbard?
Yeah,
right? You're not going to connect with individuals because, a lot of people, my line is always, I'm from Philadelphia. Most of the people I grew up with, they care about one thing over the weekend, the Philadelphia Eagles game, right? If the Birds are on, that's what they care about. And how are you going to connect with them to talk about Austrian economics? You're not. It's never going to happen. And so that's why we do the activism and we've been so successful is because we make politics sexy, right? That's our line. When we're on campus, we're able to do things that are appealing. A giant beach ball going around campus, you're going to say, what the heck is that? Right? What is that? We've done things in the past called visualize the debt. And what we do is, let's say we're about to hit $20 trillion. Let me say it one more time. We're about to hit $20 trillion.
You can't wrap your head around a number like that.
Nobody even talks about it. You remember the Tea Party, how crazy they went over?
Where'd they go?
And 15?
Yeah, no, they're gone. Nobody talks about it anymore.
It's crazy. So we would do this visualize the debt where we would build, let's say, like 6 feet by 3 feet, big displays with just the number, let's say for 19 trillion. We'd have 1, and then we'd build another display, 9, and then we'd have all the zeros with their own 6 foot by in the campus quad, right?
So they could see it.
And so people are walking by, and it's like 19 trillion, 350 billion, 450 million, and all these zeros, and then they're like, and they come up, what is this? Right? And so it's just fun
how much
ways.
Money you owe.
Right. It's I hope you can carry that on your back. But what it does is it makes it more of a conversation starter because we're never going to come at people with policy and connect. And so we pique their interest, make them ask the question, what is this? And then we can hit them with some literature. We can bring them to a follow-up meeting and we can talk about the issues and dive in and try to get them engaged. I don't want to say it's gimmicky, but what it is, we find a way to connect where many different entities, are trying to educate. We connect first, educate after.
So student generations are even quicker than dog lives. People age out in 4 years on campus. Even in your position, Jeff aged out, if I may, and had to pass the baton. To build a multi-general organization that lasts, you've got to be looking at the future. What are your plans?
My plans are to be at YAL for the next 50 years. No, so I think it's a good question, not only for me, but just the whole organization, and student leaders, they turn over quickly. So one of the things we've been doing is we've built what we call our leadership team, our state chairs. We have 65 people. So we've got California's got like 6 or 7.
Yeah, sure.
And these state chairs are there to help us with that longevity, right? And to make sure that we have sustainability over time. And so we're at a great spot as an organization because now we can focus on things like true professional development. Getting people to understand how a chapter starts, what are the best events to do, what are the things that we're doing. But I think as an organization, we're just always looking to make things more connectable for students on college campuses. And, I honestly do. I want to see myself here until we hit at least 1,000 chapters nationwide. And I'd love to see us on the C. So we do have a C4. I'd love to see us on that side really making an impact and getting students involved in races that make sense. In the best way that we can legally.
Last question for you, Cliff. Do you ever plan to run for office someday?
I do not. You have to sell your soul in that business. And
You're not ready for that, huh?
People joke, be the next. What's your call to action? I think my call to action is right here, getting young people inspired, getting them ready to take the baton. But running for office myself, I think, is very premature at this point.
Well, Cliff, your energy is contagious. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Bill.
That was Cliff Maloney, Executive Director of the Young Americans for Liberty, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Real Clear Radio Hour is a not-for-profit, donor-supported program produced in conjunction with Real Clear Politics, America's premier independent political website. To make sure you don't miss any of our shows, stop by realclearradio.org and sign up for updates. We'd like to welcome our newest supporter, Donors Trust, a donor-advised fund committed to promoting a free society. For more information, visit donorstrust.org. Ahead, we return to the 2016 YAL National Convention to speak with World Wrestling Entertainment star Glenn Kane Jacobs about his professional and political journey. Stay tuned.
The Competitive Enterprise Institute is a nonprofit public interest group based in Washington, D.C. promoting innovation and entrepreneurship for a prosperous and peaceful society. Visit CEI.org to learn more.